The global economic crisis is getting in its fifth year, and in no way it's getting overcome, in no way it's getting any better. And by the way, the crisis is producing among its by-effects conflicts, confrontations, wars, all sorts of disasters, among which, of course, we had, in the very initial phase of this crisis, the war between Georgia and Russia. And of course, that was a very traumatic experience, both for Georgian people and for Russian people, because, I mean, as a person who was brought up in the Soviet Union, I could hardly imagine ever the very idea of a war between Russia and Georgia. I mean, if I were 20 years younger, even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it would have been a complete absurdity for me even to imagine that such thing could happen. Nevertheless, it did happen. And of course, we're extremely happy now to be here in Georgia to discuss these problems, because it also a sign of change and a sign of transformation. Transition is happening here in Georgia. And this is definitely a very complicated and difficult process. We are very interested to understand it better and to learn from it. And of course, there are also lots and lots of things to be changed in the current future in Georgia, but also in Russia and in all other countries, including the dominant countries of this world, including the United States of America, where actually the crisis originated. And in this context, we are here not only to discuss conflicts, but as I said again, to discuss the ways out, to discuss the constructive alternatives, to discuss the possibilities which are opened by the crisis. And this is a big irony of the crisis, because again, in a certain sense, it is an opportunity. You know, I once read that in Chinese language, the word crisis is represented by a character which is a combination of two different characters. One character represents the word danger, and another character represents the word opportunity. Then when I met some Chinese, I asked them about that. They said, total nonsense. There is no such character in Chinese language. Though I read it in a book written by an American Chinese, so it seems that in America they invented their own Chinese language and possibly their own Chinese characters, which can be understood only in America. But whether it's true or not, whether this character with the hieroglyph exists, or it is an invention of smart American Chinese who were kind of trying to impress their Anglo-Saxon American friends. In any sense, the idea is very, very, very correct. The idea is excellent, because I think we're speaking about crisis and we're saying, well, of course it's full of dangers, it's full of problems, but it's also a chance. And it opens a window of opportunity, and maybe a few windows of opportunities. In that sense, again, it is very interesting to be here in Georgia, because this is a country which is in a period of change, in a kind of transition, in a kind of transformation. It's very far from being completed, and it's very far from getting somewhere where we can make any judgment about the results of this transformation. But isn't that the situation of the whole world? Isn't that the situation which we see in the Arab countries, which we see in Southern Europe, which we see in Latin America, which we'll soon see in the West, and I think in America itself? And I am sure it will be also Russia in the list of countries which are going to be transformed and changed quite dramatically in the coming years. I think Russia is one of many. So we are going to start talking, and I very much hope that we will have a debate, not just a series of short lectures, because there are too many lectures. It's kind of confusing a little bit even for me that we have so many good lecturers coming together and sitting at the same panel. I hope they will not create problems for each other. But I think it's very important for the audience also to participate in the debate, ask questions, make comments, and I hope we have enough time for a serious and genuine debate. And now I present our guests from left to right, which has no political connotation. It's just how they sit. It doesn't reflect their politics. John Rees is our English colleague, a sociologist and political activist who was one of the people involved in organizing huge protests in Britain against the Gulf War. And the culmination of this protest was when about 1 million people showed up in London at a mass demonstration against English participation in the Gulf War. Nevertheless, it didn't stop the war. It didn't stop British government in participating in the war. Though, by the way, in some cases, mass demonstrations did help because, for example, Sweden changed its policy towards the Gulf War because of mass protests. Austria did as well. So a few European countries actually changed their position. So in that sense, mass protests worked. But it's also very tragic that in a country which was known and which really was the first democracy in Europe, that kind of mass participation, mass protest didn't bring about political change, and the government just didn't react to this very clear expression of public disagreement with its policy. So I think John can say more about that and can also speak more about the causes and the consequences of the neoliberal policies which lead to conflicts and confrontations, both economically and politically. I'm happy to present Jeffrey Sommers, who is my old-time colleague. We wrote an article together a few years ago, and now we are working together on a book which will be some kind of intellectual product of this Postglobalization initiative, which has to put together some of the ideas which we are working on. And he will be also speaking about the global economic conditions of the current crisis and the politics of the current crisis. Georgi Derlugyan, next to the right from me, is a sociologist and historian again. So everybody is a bit of historian, I think, now these days. He's a unique person who can combine all sorts of very different experiences, starting from being in Mozambique in the 1970s as a translator and interpreter for the Soviet advisors there, and including working as a professor in the United States and publishing books in Russian, English, I guess in some other languages. The person who made a tremendous effort to make world system theory of Wollaston, Emmanuel Wollaston, Giovanni Arrighi, André Gunder-Frank, known in Russia, and not only known because, we worked together on these things, but unlike many others, he made these ideas trendy. I should even say, after his lectures and articles in Russian language, these ideas became sexy. To such an extent that even some people who don't agree with Georgi's politics often quote him, so you can suddenly find some strange bedfellows, including some Russian nationalists who all of a sudden started quoting Wollaston or Giovanni Arrighi as a source of inspiration, just because it became trendy. So it's kind of, it's to make yourself popular, you just have to quote from the world system theory. And, well, for good or bad, but I mean, it's a great achievement. William Engdahl is an economist and also a specialist in conflicts, and also writing a lot of energy issues, who also published books in English, Russian, I think German as well, yes. So he's an American living in Vienna, in Austria, and I think he, in Austria, yeah. Frank? Oh, sorry, Germany. Okay. Well, I actually I love Austria better than Germany. That's why I made this mistake. You too. Okay. So you'd rather prefer to stay in Austria, but okay, that's how life is. Anyhow, William Engdahl will be the last speaker before we then break into discussion.